Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The sun was already high, beating down with that insistent mid-July heat, the kind that makes the air shimmer above the asphalt. I was out in my front garden, wrestling with a particularly stubborn patch of crabgrass that seemed to have ambitions of world domination, starting with my petunias. My name's Carol, by the way, and if you told me that morning what the afternoon would hold, I'd have probably just chuckled and offered you a glass of iced tea for being so fanciful. My garden is my sanctuary, my little patch of chaos and color where I can lose myself for hours, just me, the soil, and the buzz of the bees. I had my wide-brimmed straw hat on, the one with the faded blue ribbon, and my knees were complaining a bit from kneeling on the old foam pad. But it was good work, honest work. The scent of damp earth and blooming roses was heavy in the air, a perfume no fancy department store could ever replicate. I was humming some forgotten tune, probably something from the 70s, lost in my own little world, when a shadow fell over me. I looked up, squinting against the bright sky. It was Arthur, my neighbor Janice's husband. Now, Arthur wasn't unfriendly, but he was quiet. One of those men who always seemed to be observing, thinking rather than talking. We'd exchanged pleasantries over the fence, of course, the usual nice weather we're having, or your lawn's looking good, but nothing more substantial. Janice was the talker in that family, a whirlwind of local news and friendly gossip. Arthur usually just nodded along, a small smile playing on his lips. He was standing there now, a few feet away, his hands tucked into the pockets of his khaki shorts. He looked a little hesitant, which was unusual. He was a tall man, still well built for his age. I'd guess he was a few years older than my own 58, with a thatch of silver hair that always seemed perfectly combed, even in the summer heat. "Morning, Carol," he said, his voice a little gravelly, like he hadn't used it much yet that day. "Arthur," I replied, pulling off a muddy gardening glove to wipe a bead of sweat from my forehead. "Didn't see you there. Everything all right?" I couldn't help a little flicker of concern. Janice hadn't been out and about as much lately, and you know how neighbors sometimes notice these things. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Oh, yes, everything's fine. Fine." He paused, looking out over my flower beds, his gaze lingering on the vibrant splash of my prize-winning zinnias. "Your garden is looking remarkable this year, Carol. Truly." I felt a small blush creep up my neck. Praise for my garden was always welcome. "Thank you, Arthur. It's a labor of love, you know how it is. Keeps me out of trouble, mostly." I chuckled, trying to lighten the slightly formal air that had settled between us. He didn't chuckle back, just gave that small, thoughtful smile. "Janice always says you have the greenest thumb in the neighborhood. She tries, bless her, but—" He trailed off, a little wistfully. I thought, well, everyone has their talents. I offered kindly. "Janice makes the most amazing lemon meringue pie. My attempts usually end up looking like a deflated souffle." This time, a genuine smile touched his eyes, crinkling the corners. "She does, doesn't she? It's her grandmother's recipe." He took a step closer, his gaze still on the flowers, but I sensed his attention was more focused now, less like he was just making polite conversation. I was, I was actually wondering if I could ask you something, Carol." My curiosity piqued. Arthur asking for something? This was new territory. "Of course, Arthur. What is it?" I straightened up a bit, brushing loose soil from my knees. The sun felt hotter now, or maybe it was just the unexpectedness of the moment. The drone of a lawnmower started up a few streets over, a familiar summer sound. But here, in this sudden quiet between us, It seemed very far away. I noticed a faint tremor in his hands as he pulled one from his pocket to gesture vaguely. There was a vulnerability about him in that moment that I hadn't seen before, a crack in the usually stoic facade. It made me lean in a little, both literally and figuratively, waiting to hear what he had to say. The petunias could wait. He took a slow breath, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were a surprisingly clear blue, like a summer sky after a cleansing rain. It's about, it's about Janice, in a way, and about memory. He paused again, as if choosing his words with extreme care. The air hummed, not just with insects, but with a kind of unspoken anticipation. I had no idea what was coming, but a little knot of intrigue and perhaps a touch of apprehension tightened in my chest. This was definitely not going to be about borrowing a cup of sugar. Arthur shifted his gaze towards his own house for a moment, a neat, well-kept colonial that always looked a little too perfect, almost like a picture in a magazine. When his eyes returned to mine, there was a depth of emotion in them that took me by surprise. Janice she's been forgetting things lately. Small things at first, where she put her keys, appointments, but it's more than that now. His voice was low, almost a whisper, and it carried a weight that resonated with me instantly. My own mother had walked that shadowed path, and I knew the landscape of that particular heartache all too well. "Oh, Arthur," I said softly, my earlier curiosity replaced by a wave of empathy. "I'm so sorry to hear that." I put my gardening glove back on, not because I intended to return to the weeds, but because I suddenly felt the need for some small, familiar comfort. He nodded slowly, his Adam's apple bobbing. "The doctors are running tests, of course, but we both know where this might be heading." He looked back at my flowers, his expression unreadable for a moment. "She's always loved flowers, yours especially. She'll stand at the window and just look at them. Sometimes it's like she's trying to hold on to the colors, the shapes." I felt a pang in my chest, the thought of vibrant Janice, the queen of lemon meringue pie and neighborhood chatter, fading like a photograph left too long in the sun, was incredibly sad. "They are beautiful," I agreed quietly, "a little bit of brightness." "Exactly," he said, his voice regaining a fraction of its earlier steadiness. "Brightness, that's what I wanted to ask you about, Carol." He took another deep breath, and this time he looked directly at me, his blue eyes searching mine. "I have this idea. It might be foolish, I don't know, but I want to I want to create something for her. Something to help her remember. Something that captures this." He gestured around at my garden, at the riot of blooms, the butterflies flitting from one flower to another. "And I was hoping you might be able to help me." I was taken aback. Help him? How? I was just a hobby gardener, not a therapist or a memory specialist. The scale of what he was hinting at felt enormous, far beyond my capabilities. And yet, looking at his earnest, slightly desperate face, the carefully concealed pain in his eyes, I couldn't bring myself to even consider saying no. There was a sincerity in his request, a raw plea for connection and help that cut through any reservations I might have had. The sun beat down. The scent of roses filled the air, and a new, unexpected path seemed to be opening up right there, amidst the petunias and the crabgrass. This was about more than just flowers. It was about kindness, about reaching out to a neighbor in a way I'd never anticipated. The world, which a few minutes ago had consisted of me and my weeds, suddenly felt much larger, much more intricate, and, in a strange way, much more meaningful. I had a feeling my gardening for the day was well and truly over. "Arthur," I said, my voice gentle but firm. Tell me what you have in mind. I'll help in any way I can. A visible wave of relief washed over his features. The tension in his shoulders seemed to lessen, and the small smile that returned to his lips was one of genuine gratitude. Thank you, Carol. Thank you. He hesitated for a moment, then continued, I want to plant a garden for her. In our backyard, a memory garden, filled with all the flowers she's ever loved, all the scents she cherishes. Something she can see, touch, smell, something tangible. He looked at me, a hopeful, almost boyish look in his eyes now. The thing is, Carol, while Janice has the admiration for gardens, I, I can barely tell a daisy from a dandelion. I wouldn't know where to begin. I couldn't help but smile. A memory garden. It was a beautiful idea, a poignant, loving gesture. And he wanted my help. Me, Carol, the quiet woman with the colorful front yard. It was an honor, really. Arthur, I said, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the summer sun. I think that's a wonderful idea. A truly wonderful idea. And I'd be delighted to help you create it. The relief in his eyes was palpable, so profound it almost made my own eyes water. You would? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Oh, Carol, that means more than you know. He ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture that seemed to release some of the pent-up worry he'd been carrying. I want to do something good, something that will still be there, even if... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I understood. We both understood. The unspoken words hung in the warm air between us, heavy with the love and fear that so often walk hand in hand. We'll make it beautiful, Arthur. I promised, my voice softer now. A place full of life and color. For Janice. He nodded, a single decisive nod. For Janice. He looked around my garden again, this time not with wistful admiration, but with a new purpose, as if he were already cataloging ideas, imagining the possibilities. Where do we start? He asked, turning back to me, a spark of eagerness replacing the earlier hesitation. I leaned down and picked up my trowel, then stuck it firmly into the soft earth of the flower bed. Well, I said, a sense of quiet determination settling over me. We start with a plan, and maybe, I added, with a glance towards his house, and then mine, another glass of that iced tea you were so kind to offer earlier might be in order. We have a lot to talk about. Arthur's smile widened. It was a good smile, one that reached his clear blue eyes and seemed to lift years of quiet worry from his face, if only for a moment. I think, he said, his voice stronger now, that's an excellent idea, Carol. An excellent idea indeed. And just like that, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, amidst the roses and the zinnias, something shifted. A neighbor I barely knew had reached out, sharing a vulnerable piece of his heart, and in doing so had invited me into a project that felt both daunting and incredibly important. I had a feeling this wasn't just about planting flowers anymore. It was about cultivating hope, nurturing memories, and perhaps in the process, discovering a connection I never expected. The crabgrass could wait. Janice's garden couldn't. As we walked towards his house, the sun still beating down, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My own life had its routines, its quiet comforts, but this felt different. This felt like making a real difference, not just in the soil, but in someone's life. Arthur opened his front door, and the cool air from inside washed over us. He gestured for me to enter. After you, Carol. As I stepped across the threshold, I had the distinct feeling that I was stepping into something much bigger than just my neighbor's house. I was stepping into a story, a shared human experience of love, loss, and the enduring power of memory. And surprisingly, I wasn't apprehensive. I was ready. Inside, Arthur's home was as neat as its exterior suggested, but it also had a lived-in warmth that the outside didn't quite convey. Photographs dotted the mantelpiece. Janice and Arthur, younger, smiling, children who were now grown, grandchildren I'd only seen in passing. It was a tapestry of a life well lived, a life now facing an unwelcome shadow. Janice was nowhere to be seen, and Arthur explained quietly that she was having one of her foggy days and was resting. His voice was gentle when he spoke of her, a soft cadence of care and concern. He led me to the kitchen, a bright, airy room overlooking their backyard. It was a good-sized yard, a blank canvas compared to my own explosion of flora, a well-maintained lawn, a few mature trees at the perimeter, but mostly empty space, perfect for a new garden. Arthur poured us both tall glasses of iced tea, the condensation already beating on the outside. We sat at his kitchen table, a sturdy oak affair that had clearly seen many family meals. For a few moments, we just sipped our tea in comfortable silence, the only sounds the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of birds. Then, Arthur pulled out a small, worn notebook and a pen from a nearby drawer. "I've tried to make a list," he began, opening it. "Flowers Janice has mentioned over the years. Ones I remember from her mother's garden. Things I've seen her admire." His handwriting was neat, precise, a list of names. Roses, of course. Peace and Mr. Lincoln were specifically noted. Lavender, lilacs, peonies, the old-fashioned, fragrant kind. Forget-me-nots, which brought a lump to my throat just seeing the name written down. Lily of the Valley. Sunflowers. It was a beautiful list, a testament to his attentiveness, his love. "This is a wonderful start, Arthur," I said, genuinely impressed. "You've paid more attention than you think." He looked up, a hint of a blush on his cheeks. "When you love someone, you notice things, even if you don't always say so." His words hung in the air for a moment, simple and profound. I thought about my own late husband, Michael, and the small things I still cherished, the details of him that were etched into my memory. The way he used to hum off key while he made coffee, the specific scent of his old wool sweater. Arthur was right. Love was in the noticing. "Okay," I said, taking a sip of my tea, feeling a surge of practical energy. "Let's talk about your yard. Sun exposure, soil type, though we can amend that, water sources, and most importantly, how does Janice like to experience a garden? Does she like to sit in it, walk through it, just view it from the window?" Arthur leaned forward, his initial nervousness replaced by an engaged enthusiasm. "All of the above, I think. She used to love puttering. Not heavy work, but deadheading, light weeding. She'd bring a book and a cup of tea and just sit amongst the flowers. Lately, though, it's mostly been from the window." His gaze drifted to the window overlooking the backyard. "So visibility from here, from the kitchen and the sunroom, is important." We spent the next hour or so sketching rough plans on a piece of paper Arthur found, a discarded envelope. We talked about creating pathways, perhaps a small bench. He told me stories about some of the flowers on his list, how Janice's grandmother always had a profusion of peonies by her front porch, how they'd once visited a lavender farm on an anniversary trip. Each flower wasn't just a plant. It was a memory, a connection to a moment in time, a piece of Janice's story. As I listened, I realized this garden project was as much for Arthur as it was for Janice. It was a way for him to actively love her, to fight back against the encroaching fog in a tangible way. It was an act of devotion whispered in the language of petals and perfume. And Carol, the neighbor with the green thumb, had been given the privilege of being his translator, his collaborator in this quiet, beautiful rebellion against forgetting. The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, dust motes dancing in the golden light. We were two people, not so different in age or experience, brought together by an unexpected request, embarking on a journey that felt both sacred and incredibly human. The iced tea was long gone, but a new kind of warmth had filled the space between us. The warmth of shared purpose, of quiet understanding, and the first tender shoots of an unlikely friendship. The real work was just beginning, but in that sun-drenched kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of future flowers, I felt a profound sense of hope. We agreed to meet the next morning to take a proper look at the yard, measure things out, and make a more detailed list of what we'd need. As I prepared to leave, Arthur walked me to the door. "Carol," he said, his voice sincere, I can't tell you how much this means to me. Your willingness to help." "Arthur," I replied, meeting his gaze, "it's a privilege. Truly. We'll make it a garden Janice will adore, and a place you can both find some peace in." He nodded, a flicker of something, gratitude, maybe even a little bit of hope, in his blue eyes. "Thank you," he said again, simply. Walking back to my own house, the familiar comfort of my own overgrown garden wrapping around me, I felt different. The crabgrass still needed tackling, the petunias still needed deadheading, but my perspective had shifted. My little world had expanded to include Arthur's quiet strength and Janice's unspoken need. The simple act of gardening, which had always been a personal solace, now felt like it had a larger purpose. I looked at my roses, their vibrant colors almost glowing in the late afternoon light, and I thought about the peace and mister, Lincoln roses we'd soon be planting for Janice. Flowers weren't just pretty things to look at. They were anchors, reminders, keepers of memories. And sometimes they were the seeds of unexpected connections. I went inside, my mind already buzzing with ideas for pathways and plant combinations, a new energy thrumming through me. Tomorrow was a new day, and there was a garden waiting to be born. The next morning dawned bright and clear, with that fresh, clean scent that follows a cool summer night. I was up early, coffee in hand, already sketching out a rough layout for Janice's garden on a notepad. My own garden chores felt less pressing. This new project had taken root in my mind, its tendrils of possibility unfurling with surprising speed. When I saw Arthur step out into his backyard around 8, I grabbed my hat and my notes and headed over. He was already there, a tape measure in hand, looking a bit like a general surveying his battlefield, albeit a very green and peaceful one. "Morning, Arthur," I called out, feeling a cheerful anticipation I hadn't expected. He turned, a small smile on his face. "Morning, Carol. You're bright and early." "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Too busy designing. I think I've figured out where the rose bushes should go to get the best morning sun and still be visible from your kitchen window." His smile widened. "You're a wonder, Carol." We spent the next couple of hours measuring, marking out potential beds with string, and discussing the practicalities. Arthur, it turned out, was a meticulous planner, a man who liked things to be just so. It was a trait I could appreciate. He listened intently as I talked about companion planting, soil enrichment, and the importance of varying heights and textures to create visual interest. He asked intelligent questions, took copious notes in his little book, and I could see his initial trepidation being replaced by a quiet confidence. He wasn't a gardener, no, but he was a man deeply committed to this endeavor, and that, I was quickly learning, was more important than any amount of horticultural expertise. At one point, Janice appeared at the kitchen window, a fleeting glimpse. She looked a little pale, a little unsure, but she raised a hand in a small wave when she saw us. Arthur's face softened instantly. He waved back, a tender, reassuring gesture. "She's having a better morning," he said to me, his voice low. "Seeing us out here, I think it cheers her." I felt a lump in my throat. It was such a small thing, us standing in the yard with strings and a tape measure, but for Janice, perhaps it represented hope, a future still being tended to. We decided to focus on an area easily visible from the kitchen and sunroom, a gently curving bed that would sweep along the back of the house, with a small flagstone path leading to a bench nestled under a mature maple tree on their property line. Arthur loved the idea of the bench. She could sit there, he mused, in the shade, with the flowers all around her, like she used to. We made a list of supplies: good quality topsoil, compost, mulch, edging stones. Then came the fun part, the plant list. We reviewed Arthur's initial notes, and I added some suggestions: plants known for their strong fragrances like gardenias and jasmine, things with interesting foliage for year-round appeal, and a few cheerful, easy care annuals to provide instant color while the perennials established themselves. Arthur was particularly taken with the idea of planting herbs like rosemary for remembrance, I'd told him, and mint because Janice loved mint tea. "This is going to be more work than I initially imagined," Arthur admitted, looking at our expanding list, but there was no hint of discouragement in his voice, only a kind of determined respect for the task ahead. "Good things usually are," I replied, "but we'll do it a bit at a time. No need to rush. The journey is part of it, isn't it?" He looked at me, then a long, thoughtful look. "You're very wise, Carol." I just shrugged, a little embarrassed by the compliment. "Just been around the block a few times, Arthur. Picked up a few things along the way, mostly in the garden." By lunchtime, we had a solid plan. We'd start with preparing the main bed, clearing the grass, and amending the soil. Arthur insisted on handling the heavy lifting, despite my offers to help. "You're the brains of this operation, Carol," he said with a grin. "I can at least be the brawn." Over the next few days, a new rhythm established itself. I'd tend to my own garden in the early mornings, then head over to Arthur's. He worked with a quiet diligence, removing sod, tilling the earth, wheelbarrowing in loads of fresh soil and compost. I acted as supervisor, consultant, and chief encourager. We fell into an easy companionship. We didn't talk constantly. Much of our time was spent in comfortable silence, punctuated by the sounds of our work, the scrape of a shovel, the snip of shears, the occasional sigh of exertion from Arthur. But when we did talk, it was often about more than just soil pH or sunlight requirements. Arthur, slowly, tentatively, began to share more about Janice, about their life together, their travels, their early dreams. He spoke of her kindness, her quick wit, the way her eyes used to sparkle when she laughed. He didn't dwell on the difficulties of her current condition, but focused instead on the vibrant woman he loved, the woman he was building this garden for. And I, in turn, found myself talking about Michael, about the void he'd left, but also about the happy years we'd shared. I hadn't realized how much I'd kept bottled up until those conversations with Arthur, under the shade of his maple tree, surrounded by the scent of freshly turned earth. There was a gentleness about him, a quiet understanding that made it easy to open up. He wasn't just Janice's husband anymore. He was Arthur, a man with his own hopes, fears, and a deep well of love for his wife. He was becoming a friend. One afternoon, as we were carefully placing the first edging stones, creating the serpentine border of the main flower bed, Arthur paused, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "You know, Carol," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I haven't felt this purposeful in a long time. Since Janice got sick, so much of my energy has been focused on doctors, on managing, on worrying. He gestured to the emerging garden bed. This feels different, like I'm creating something, not just reacting to something. It is different, Arthur, I said. It's an act of love, and those are always powerful. He nodded, a slow, considered movement. She asked about it this morning, asked what all the digging was for. I told her we were making a surprise for her, a special garden. And Carol, she smiled, a real, genuine smile, the kind I haven't seen in weeks. His voice cracked a little on the last words, and he turned away, pretending to inspect an edging stone. I didn't say anything, just gave him a moment. The sun was warm on my back, the birds were singing, and in that small shared space, something beautiful was taking shape, not just in the earth, but between two people who had, until recently, been little more than nodding acquaintances. This garden was already working its magic, even before the first flower was planted. It was a testament to hope, to the enduring strength of the human heart, and to the unexpected connections that can blossom in the most unlikely of circumstances. I picked up another stone, ready to continue. There was still much to do, but for the first time in a long while, Arthur's backyard didn't feel like an empty space. It felt like a promise. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. We made several trips to the local nursery, Arthur pushing the cart while I excitedly pointed out the healthiest looking perennials and the most vibrant annuals. He'd listen intently as I explained the needs of each plant, occasionally asking, "You think Janice would like this one?" His concern was always, first and foremost, her. It was incredibly endearing. The nursery staff, a cheerful young woman named Sarah, who knew me from my frequent visits, quickly picked up on the special nature of our project. She offered advice, helped us find the best specimens, and even gave Arthur a small discount, saying, "Anyone building a garden for his wife deserves a bit of good karma." Arthur had blushed, but looked immensely pleased. Planting day was a revelation. What had been bare earth just days before began to transform under our hands. We started with the roses, Peace, and Mr. Lincoln, giving them pride of place where the morning sun would hit them just right. Arthur handled them with a reverence that touched me, carefully teasing out their roots, settling them into their new homes as if they were precious jewels. Then came the lavender, its silvery foliage and promised fragrance a balm to the senses even before it bloomed. We tucked in peonies, their tight buds holding the promise of future extravagance, and scattered forget-me-not seeds in little drifts, hoping they'd naturalize and spread. Lily of the valley went into a shadier spot, their delicate bells a future secret for Janice to discover. As we worked, Janice would sometimes watch from the kitchen window. Her presence was a gentle encouragement. Once, she even came out to the patio, bundled in a light cardigan despite the warmth of the day, and sat on a chair Arthur quickly provided. She didn't say much, but her eyes followed our movements, a soft, contemplative expression on her face. When I brought over a small pot of freshly planted pansies, their cheerful faces bright with color, and held it out for her, she reached out a tentative hand and stroked one of the velvety petals. A faint smile touched her lips. "Pretty," she whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear. Arthur, standing beside me, visibly relaxed. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. The physical labor was tiring, especially for Arthur, who wasn't used to it. There were days when his back ached and his hands were sore, but he never complained. He'd just rub his temples, take a deep breath, and then pick up his trowel again. I learned to read his cues, to know when it was time for a break, for a cool drink, and a few minutes of rest in the shade of the maple tree. During these breaks, our conversations continued to deepen. He told me about his career, as an engineer, his love for woodworking, a hobby he hadn't had much time for lately, and his anxieties about the future. I shared my own stories, my joys and sorrows, the small triumphs and quiet regrets that make up a life. We were building more than a garden. We were building a bridge of understanding between us, a quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity. One particularly hot afternoon, after we'd finished planting a large drift of salvia that promised a long season of blue blooms, Arthur leaned back against the maple tree, his face flushed but content. You know, Carol, he said, his voice a little tired but laced with satisfaction, I never thought I'd find myself enjoying digging in the dirt so much. He chuckled. Janice was always the one with the appreciation for these things. I was more of a lawn man. Keep it neat, keep it green. There's something elemental about it, isn't there? I replied, sipping from my water bottle. Connecting with the earth, nurturing something, watching it grow. It's good for the soul. It is, he agreed. It really is. He looked out at the newly planted beds, at the fresh mulch spread neatly around the young plants. When I look at this, I don't just see flowers. I see a piece of her, a piece of us. His eyes were a little misty. And I see you, Carol, your kindness, your patience. I couldn't have done any of this without you. I felt my own eyes prickle. Oh, Arthur, I said softly, it's been my pleasure. Truly, this garden has given me something too. You know, he looked at me, questioning, a sense of purpose. I explained, a new friend. I smiled, and the satisfaction of knowing we're creating something truly beautiful and meaningful. He returned the smile, a genuine, warm smile that made his blue eyes shine. Well, I'm glad for that, for all of it. As the days turned into weeks, the garden began to take on a life of its own. The annuals burst into bloom, providing instant cheer, while the perennials slowly settled in, unfurling new leaves, reaching for the sun. Arthur took over the watering duties, diligently checking the soil moisture each morning and evening. He even started deadheading the pansies, just as he'd seen me do, his large, capable hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate blooms. He'd report to me on new growth, on buds forming, on the first butterfly he'd seen flitting among the new plants. His enthusiasm was infectious. The bench we'd planned arrived, a simple, sturdy wooden one. Arthur assembled it himself and placed it exactly where we'd envisioned, under the maple tree, overlooking the burgeoning garden. The first time he coaxed Janice to sit there with him, just for a few minutes, I watched from my own yard, my heart swelling. He pointed out the different flowers, his voice soft and low. She didn't say much, but she leaned against him, and her hand found his. It was a picture of quiet devotion, a testament to a love that was adapting, finding new ways to express itself in the face of adversity. One late afternoon, as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, Arthur called me over. Carol, come see, he said, his voice urgent with excitement. I hurried over, wondering what it could be. He led me to a patch near the front of the border where we'd planted the peace roses, and there, nestled among the glossy green leaves, was a perfect creamy yellow bud just beginning to unfurl, its edges tinged with the softest pink. The first rose. Oh, Arthur, I breathed. It's beautiful. He was beaming like a proud father. I checked it this morning, and it was still tightly closed. And now look at it. He leaned closer, inhaling its delicate fragrance. Peace, he murmured. It's fitting, isn't it? It was more than fitting. It was perfect. In that moment, with the scent of the nascent rose mingling with the aroma of damp earth and the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a profound sense of completion, of a circle gently closing. This garden wasn't just a collection of plants. It was a living, breathing symbol of hope, love, and remembrance. And it was a testament to an unexpected friendship that had blossomed in the most fertile of grounds, the shared soil of human kindness. Arthur looked at me, his eyes full of a gratitude that needed no words. I simply smiled back, my heart full. The real magic wasn't just in the flowers, it was in the journey we had taken together to bring them to life. And that, I knew, was something neither of us would ever forget.